only 9 prisoners have been released from captivity in North Vietnam. All 9 were turned over to American peace groups visiting Hanoi. All were released with considerable show. The first 3 were turned loose just before Tet 1968. The second trio about 6 months later. And the last 3, 1 year after that. Their first comments after getting out were cautious and fairly favorable to their captors.
How was the treatment you received while a prisoner?
I received adequate food, clothing, and housing.
Was it humane? Would you describe it as humane treatment?
Sir, I believe I've answered that question.
Theirs were the fortunate families.
Oh, you're so sweet. You didn't forget Daddy, did you?
8 of the 9 are now back on active military duty. The 9th, the youngest and the only enlisted man, is now a civilian employee of the Navy. At first, they remained silent about their experiences. When the Nixon administration made the POW issue a public one, the ex-prisoners began to talk, with frequent appearances across the country and with official encouragement. Our correspondents interviewed them. All told of beatings immediately upon capture. Some told of cruel interrogation. All spoke of marginal diet and marginal medical care. But what seemed worst to all, the isolation, the feeling of being forgotten, the propaganda of their captors.
Every day was exactly the same. There was no labor detail. There was no recreation whatsoever. But for 4 or 5 hours each day, that loudspeaker would blare propaganda to us. And the basis for that propaganda went something like this: that we, the North Vietnamese, are not going to defeat you in Vietnam. We're going to defeat you in your universities and on your streets.
It played up racial problems. Your country's in trouble, you know, and they're not even concerned about you. They don't even know you. They've forgotten. You've been erased from their memory. They use statements that high government officials would make that they could use to their benefit to further convince me that people didn't care.
They only showed us their side of the story. Everything about riots, discontent, marches, peace marches, everything that every politician who stood against the war said and did. And you never saw anything good or to indicate that there was any unity within the country. And I think the Vietnamese themselves were pretty well led to believe that we were on the brink of revolution over here.
What you didn't get over the Radio Hanoi broadcast, or what you didn't get from the reading material, you'd get from an indoctrinator. And he would bring you in and sit down, and after, of course, not sitting in a cell by yourself for a week, 10 days, or 3 weeks, anybody that can speak English, you're ready to talk to. And he'll sit there and talk to you, and the conversation will start out simply about maybe Yellowstone National Park or Disneyland, and it'll progress, and it'll eventually get around to the war and what you think about the war, and isn't it too bad that you're bombing the women and children and things like that. It always points to the anti-war.
After you've been there for, let's say, about a year, you know you're in a communist prison camp, and you know that they're having this re-education program, and so you start asking yourself, am I brainwashed? And if I was, would I know it? Or is brainwashing something that's so subtle that you don't even realize it?
Of course, there's a lot of different definitions to brainwash, but I did find myself, after a while, sort of using some of their words just without thinking, perfidious and all kinds of words that they constantly use on their PA system and so forth. But I would not say I was brainwashed into communism or anything like this. They're not interested in making you a communist as far as I could see. They never talked of communism. They referred to themselves as socialists. And what they wanted to do is make you a sympathizer.
And during the entire time you were there, were you isolated all the time?
Yes, I was.
Were you ever allowed to talk to any other prisoner?
No, that was very definitely against the rules. The whole method of handling prisoners when I was there was one of total isolation, even for those who had roommates, and as many as 4 were rooming together from what I've heard and seen. And they would just simply open one cell and take whoever's in that cell to bathe or to pick up food or whatever, bring them back, lock them up, and then open the next one.
The idea was separation to prevent any means of communications that they possibly could between prisoners. And of course, the military aspects of this are fantastic, really. It prevents any type of group effort for escape. Without contact with your fellow prisoners, they have complete rule, complete hand over you. They control the information that you get. It's a new way of keeping prisoners as far as what we had learned from previous wars.
We weren't even supposed to know there were any other prisoners in the camp. Of course, we knew it, but the idea was that we would have absolutely no contact with anybody outside our own cell.
I tried to keep my mind occupied, to keep from feeling sorry for myself, and I did a lot of praying and tried to keep up hope and think that I would eventually get out. I never stopped to think, well, what if I'm here for 2 years or 3 years? I just sort of lived one day at a time, and I think I learned this after a period that I had to think, well, maybe tomorrow I'll get out some way. I'll be able to escape, or the war will be over and we'll all be released and go home, or what?
I'm a little older. I was 40 when I was shot down, and 42 actually. And I felt a loss of identity, of rotting in a North Vietnamese jail. And these are the things that I had to fight, depression and what have you.
I remember the story of a guy who built a ranch in his mine in Korea, and then when he got home, he built it. Well, I'm not an engineer or a carpenter or anything like that. I tried something simple. I built a cottage, a small frame cottage on a lake, kind of a summer place, you know. I drew the designs in my mind, and I built it board by board. It took quite a time. I played memory games. I tried to remember everything I had, every place I'd lived, everything I'd done, people I knew, songs, books, movies, anything like that. And there were times, like when I'd be working on that cottage, it got very real. I was stacking rocks, building the fireplace, and they fell down several times. And I didn't understand that. And it would worry me. I'd say, well, tomorrow I'm not even going to fool with it. I'm going to fish. And then I'd sit there on the end of my bed and imagine a fishing trip or a hunting trip or something like that.
At one point in my captivity, I felt like I hit rock bottom. I was a very bitter man because I felt that nobody back here cared. I got shot down. I almost died. Everybody back home got up and went to work the next day. Nobody cared. I knew there wasn't any great national resolve. So therefore, I was very bitter to the point that one day I said to myself, this is hell, and I'm making it hell. And I got down on my knees in the cell, and I started to pray. And I could actually feel myself physically gain strength from that point on. And I was able to change my mental attitude just like that. I changed my thought pattern from thinking in the past to thinking in the future, what it would be like when I got home, and I was able to maintain a different outlook. And I'm sure this is what the men back there are doing.
Those 9 men, remember, were released in 1968 and 69. There have been indications, but no sure proof, that the treatment of POWs has improved since then. Hanoi never has permitted the International Red Cross inspections which would verify this. From the families, we do know that the mail flow has substantially increased. In spite of this, Hanoi has remained unyielding toward all moves to free more POWs. Just 2 months ago, Saigon, at the urging of the United States, offered repatriation of the largest group of North Vietnamese prisoners so far in this war. Altogether, 570. In the hope, it was said, that Hanoi might reciprocate. 5 times since June of 1966, Saigon has released North Vietnamese, totaling some 240 men. Some went by foot across a bridge in the demilitarized zone, others by small life raft. Once freed, these former POWs reacted similarly, defiantly shedding the traces of their captivity, the bags of personal items which had been given them, the clothes and even the life preservers they wore. Hanoi refused to cooperate in those releases, refused even to acknowledge them. But on the latest offer, Hanoi agreed in advance to accept the men and dictated the arrangements for a transfer at sea. But the bulk of the 570 sick and wounded refused to go, as is their right under the Geneva Conventions if hostilities are still underway. Only 13 wanted to go home. And after they had gotten to sea, Hanoi reneged, refused to take them, accusing both Saigon and Washington of duplicity. Both sides tried to turn the incident to propaganda advantage. This was a news conference at Saigon's foreign ministry.
We have found out that 98% of the sick and wounded prisoners of war refused to return to the North. They seem to have enjoyed the better treatment in South Vietnam and the security situation in the Republic of Vietnam.
Just how well does Saigon treat its North Vietnamese and Viet Cong prisoners? As of last November, 583 enemy POWs had died in captivity. CBS News' repeated requests over 3 months to film prison conditions in South Vietnam have gone unanswered. But there have been in the past occasional opportunities to see behind the barbed wire. Such as last Christmas during the visit of a papal delegate to the Bien Hoa camp, which contained 4,300 POWs. There were individual gift packets for the inmates, towel, shirt, soap, cigarettes, candy, and cookies, and a picture of Pope Paul. There were musical instruments. There were new wheelchairs, delivered just that morning. There was a carefully directed tour of the camp. A look at the barracks and furnishings. Even a mass and communion service. In fact, the scene was similar to the Christmas films from North Vietnam. From all we have been able to see, once in a South Vietnamese prison, a captive designated as POW is treated at least as well as the propaganda films indicate the Americans are treated in the North. But at the time of capture, according to repeated eyewitness accounts, the North Vietnamese or Viet Cong may suffer a harsher fate than the American pilot who falls into enemy hands. Indeed, there have been many accounts of torture and death. There are some 36,000 captives and prisoner of war camps in South Vietnam, and Saigon holds many thousands more as political prisoners in other camps and jails. The treatment of political opponents of the regime is often harsher than that of the men and women and children designated as enemy troops. And in a war like Vietnam, the distinction between the soldiers and the supporters of the other side is inevitably blurred. This is particularly important to the United States since we turn over all captives to Saigon. Their prisoners are our responsibility. Thus, the revelation of South Vietnam's tiger cages on the island prison of Con Son last July was of direct concern to the United States. Bob Schieffer talked to Democratic Congressman William Anderson of Tennessee, a former nuclear submarine captain who was involved in that disclosure.
Congressman, when you were in Vietnam, you got a rare glance at the way the South Vietnamese handled their prisoners.
Well, a very distasteful glimpse, I might add. Congressman Hawkins of California and I and others did visit Con Son last summer. And Con Son is a penal colony containing, at that time, almost 10,000 prisoners. Some 500 to 600 were contained in the now well-known tiger cages under conditions of very, very inhumane confinement, so crowded that not all prisoners could lie down and sleep at one time. Very poor food. Many of them were sick because of long confinement and poor diet and crowding. We found in the building containing the male prisoners a situation in which not a single prisoner was able to use his limbs. He was not able to stand up. We found the use of lime as a poor man's tear gas. Obviously, the lime had been thrown down into the cages in order to discipline or to quieten the prisoners, and really just overall a condition that I would describe as barbaric.
Well, does all of this have any effect on the way the North Vietnamese treat our prisoners at their prison camps in the North?
Well, that was a matter of very, very prime concern after we saw the conditions on Con Son, and we realized that the United States was involved with its aid money and with its personnel related to the South Vietnamese civilian prison system. We felt that it was very, very important and urgent that we clean up our own house so that we would have a stronger position to deal with relative to insisting that the North adhere to the Geneva Convention.
The United States has indeed insisted that Hanoi has violated the Geneva Conventions. For example, putting our men on show for their people and refusing to open POW camps for Red Cross inspection. The North Vietnamese, for their part, always have insisted that the downed pilots are criminals and not even entitled to POW status. But they say they are following the humanitarian provisions of the Geneva Conventions. The U.S. prisoners represent a relatively small number of our casualties, for the statistics show Indochina to be a killing war, not a capturing war, as far as Americans are concerned. 45,000 Americans have been killed in combat, but the latest Defense Department casualty report lists 1,621 Americans captured or missing since the war began. Almost half of this total is for North Vietnam, 378 captured and 405 missing. Hanoi says it has captured 368 Americans, including 20 who died after capture and the 9 who were released. It is, say the enemy, their official and complete list. They say nothing about the missing. The Pentagon lists 82 captured and 505 missing in South Vietnam, not including 23 released by the Viet Cong and 21 who escaped. The Viet Cong have indirectly acknowledged 20 of the 82 we say are in captivity. They account for none of the missing. The Pentagon figures for Laos list only 3 men captured, but 248 missing. In propaganda, the Pathet Lao has admitted to holding only 1 American. The figures for Cambodia are not listed separately, but are, the Pentagon says, included in the South Vietnam totals. The figures listed by each side may differ, but they are quite explicit. The Pentagon says there are 463 known captives throughout Indochina. The other side acknowledges 389, a difference of 74 men. Yet in the supercharged rhetoric of debate, the numbers are sometimes confused, sometimes misstated, most frequently by lumping together men known to be captured and those who are missing. Earlier in this broadcast, for example, we heard President Nixon say,
as long as there are American POWs, and there are 1,600 Americans in North Vietnam jail under very difficult circumstances at the present time, as long as there are American POWs in North Vietnam, we will have to maintain a residual force in South Vietnam.
But the official Pentagon figures, once more, list only 378 men known to be in North Vietnamese prisons. Mr. Nixon's figure was for prisoners and missing throughout all of Indochina. There have been many other sources, official and otherwise, of misleading numbers. This was a newspaper advertisement placed nationally last month by the Reader's Digest. Bob Schieffer talked with Reader's Digest executive editor Hobart Lewis about it.
The ad says that these 50 men and 1,550 others like them are going through hell. And do you feel that you may have over-dramatized the issue by using those particular numbers?
Well, I think when we say these men are going through hell, that's not an understatement. When we say plus 1,550 more, undoubtedly is an overstatement and have to be charged to license for a headline writer in an advertising agency. The fact is, though, in the copy, I think we say it correctly, these men are either prisoners of war or presumed to be prisoners of war or missing.
But the ad does seem to give the impression that 1,600 men are rotting away in prisons. Do you feel that was a misrepresentation?
To that degree, I would have to agree with you. It is an overstatement.
Well, let's just say that overall, the number of prisoners in Indochina is probably on the order of 450 or 500. It could be somewhat more. We don't know for sure because we have not had a list provided or any coherent information that we can say gives us a complete tally.
Frank Sieverts is the State Department official who has worked on the POW problem for years. He feels there are far fewer than 1,600 Americans alive in enemy prisons. But he also feels Hanoi has failed to give a full accounting of the men it does hold. He told Marvin Kalb why.
I think the reason they would not give it for men captured in South Vietnam is because of North Vietnam's adamant and continued unwillingness to acknowledge any involvement in South Vietnam.
What about a pilot shot down over the north?
Well, why would they not give information on the pilot shot down in the north? They say they have given complete and final information on all the pilots shot down.
But your point is that you have additional information, that there are others there.
I didn't say that we have additional information that others are there and alive today. I do say that there are a number of cases, including such things as photographs, broadcasts from North Vietnam, and the word of returning prisoners, which indicate unmistakably that other men, not accounted for, not identified on any of their lists, were known to be in North Vietnam, were captured. We can't say for sure these men are alive. It may be that the explanation is that no others have survived, but the explanation so far is seriously deficient.
Mrs. Cora Weiss is co-chairman of a peace group called the Committee of Liaison. It is North Vietnam's chosen instrument for mail to and from and information about the POWs. She told Bob Schieffer she believed Hanoi's list is accurate.
We have no reason to doubt the completeness of that list. There would be no reason for them to withhold names of men whom they have. It's of no military value. The tragedy is that the government insists on having families hang on to false hopes by stating that there are more men who are actually prisoners for whom the government has never offered documentation.
So, is it your belief that those who are listed as missing in North Vietnam are actually dead?
They are not prisoners of war in North Vietnam.
In this hour, we have looked at the American prisoners as human victims and political pawns of the Vietnam War. Until today, in spite of the anguished attention focused on these men, in spite of the rhetoric, the basic problem, getting the POWs out, was no closer to solution than it was when the administration decided to make it a public issue more than 2 years ago. But now, with the Senate's dramatic vote, the White House is on the spot. Secretary of State Rogers' remarks at a news conference last week seemed to foreshadow the dilemma the administration faces.
Well, I don't have to tell you that it's an extremely difficult proposition because the North Vietnamese have decided, and undoubtedly, that they're going to hold these prisoners to try to achieve political objectives. And in effect, they're using them for ransom payments. Obviously, the United States, although we have tremendous concern for the safety of the prisoners, we can't lose sight of our national purposes. And we can't absolutely abandon our national objectives to pay ransom.
So far, most of the relatives of the prisoners have been patient. Many have joined the campaign in behalf of their men. But as the flights to Paris, to Moscow, to Phnom Penh, to Vientiane have produced no results, as the peace talks have gotten nowhere, as the prisoners have become a domestic political issue, their patience has begun to wear thin. They have won sympathy from the most hawkish of hawks and the most dovish of doves, but they have not got their men back. And some of the families are talking of new actions.
Well, the New Hampshire primaries in March, and I feel that if those prisoners are not negotiated out of there by then, that there's going to be a POW wife on every street corner in this country when the campaign is going on. We are the refuse part of it that comes out of this war, and we cannot be passed off lightly. We have to get a commitment of some kind from somebody that these men are not going to be left behind.
And this is what we want the country to recognize. There is an urgency, tremendous urgency for our men. Some of them have been there 6 going on 7 years. Now, I'm sorry, I'm not willing to sacrifice my husband for a cause that no one believes in.
So what's the next step?
The next step is just simply Washington. We have to meet with these people in Washington and make them realize that the only way we'll ever get our husbands back alive is through a change in policy. And if it comes now, it may save their lives. If it comes next year, we may give South Vietnam another year to prepare herself. But this might be the year to send our husbands down the river forever.
The anguish of the families, the POWs as a political, the nature of the public campaign in their behalf. These are the subjects of our next report, 1 week from tonight at this same time. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.